September 3, 1935. RAF Bawdsey Manor, Suffolk, England. A cold wind rolls in from the North Sea, rattling the windows of a converted country estate now crawling with uniformed officers, men in lab coats, and a tangle of cables and metal towers no one in the Royal Air Force quite understands. Inside a drafty room lit by oil lamps and humming equipment, 37-year-old engineer Sir Robert Watson Watt adjusts his glasses and peers over a cluster of oscilloscopes. Around him, a small group of scientists, many of them more comfortable in university lecture halls than in military facilities, exchange quiet arguments over wavelengths, ionization, and reflection patterns. Behind them, a skeptical RAF Air Vice Marshal mutters, the same line he has repeated for months. Invisible beams that can spot aircraft before we can see them? Sounds like something out of H.G. Wells. To many in Britain's Air Ministry, radar isn't science. It's science fiction. At this moment, the threat Germany poses is still theoretical. Hitler has not yet unleashed the Luftwaffe upon Europe, and many senior officers in the RAF still believe that the only way to detect incoming aircraft is what Britain has relied on for centuries: eyes. Spotters with binoculars, telephone chains, human observation. But Watson Watt believes the future of war will be decided by something no human eye can see: radio waves bouncing off metal at the speed of light. The first test is brutal in its simplicity. A Royal Air Force bomber flies along the Suffolk coast while the team watches the crude electronic display. Bulky equipment hums. Static cracks. The oscillograph jumps. Once, twice, just when the aircraft passes. The signal appears again. Not imagination. Not interference. Detection. The room goes silent. For the first time in history, a machine has spotted a hostile aircraft long before a human ever could. Yet outside this manor, almost no one believes it. The British government approves funding, but just barely. Some officers still laugh that radar will melt in the fog. Others insist aircraft move too fast, or the signal could never cover an entire nation, or Germany will bomb anything built on the coast anyway. But a small classified project now carries a monumental task: build a wall of invisible eyes across Britain before the war begins. The name given to this project is simple: Chain Home. A line of gigantic steel radar towers, 350 feet high, will stretch from the Isle of Wight to the Scottish border, each one capable of detecting enemy aircraft more than 100 miles away. To the public, they look like just another mysterious government structure. To the RAF, they look like madness. No one has ever built anything like this. No one knows if it will even work when it matters. And time is running out. September 1st, 1939. Hitler invades Poland. Britain declares war 2 days later. Within months, the Luftwaffe sweeps across Europe like a storm. Norway falls. Denmark falls. Belgium and the Netherlands follow. France, mighty France, collapses in 6 weeks. Now only the English Channel stands between Hitler and London. By June 1940, the RAF expects a German invasion at any moment. Fighter Command scrambles to prepare. But they face a math problem they cannot escape. Britain has fewer pilots, fewer planes, and fewer factories than Germany. If the Luftwaffe destroys the RAF on the ground, Britain dies. Every Spitfire, every Hurricane, every gallon of fuel, every pilot who survives one dogfight and dies in the next. Everything depends on knowing where the enemy is before they strike. And high on the cliffs of Dover, the first Chain Home tower begins to pulse. The radar war has begun. But only a handful of people in Britain understand just how crucial these strange towers may become. To most of Fighter Command, the new system is a nuisance, too technical, too experimental, too new. In a war built on courage and instinct, the idea that battles might be decided by an electrical echo on a screen still feels absurd. Yet in a small room at RAF Bentley Priory, a woman in a headset begins receiving the first real-time radar plot of German aircraft lifting off from France. She marks a small black triangle on a map table. The information travels to Fighter Command headquarters. Scramble orders are sent. Pilots run. Engines roar to life. On that day, British fighters are in the air before the German bombers even cross the channel. Radars are still crackling with interference. Operators still argue about signal noise. Towers still need calibration. But something extraordinary has happened. For the first time in aviation history, one nation has seen its enemy before the enemy has seen them. And the Luftwaffe has no idea how. The men who once mocked radar as fantasy now have no choice but to rely on it. Because the Battle of Britain is coming. And when it begins, every second will decide who lives, who dies, and whether Britain falls. July 10, 1940, 4:47 hours. English Channel. The first formal day of the Battle of Britain. Low clouds drift over the water as dozens of Dornier reconnaissance aircraft and Heinkel bombers leave their bases in occupied France. The Luftwaffe believes the RAF is weak, disorganized, and blind. Germany assumes that the British can only react after an attack has begun, too late to stop them. But 120 miles away, on the British coast near Ventnor, a chain home tower wakes before the pilots do. Each tower sends a pulse of radio energy into the sky, like a lighthouse made of invisible light. Metal reflects that energy. Bombers are metal. Fighters are metal. Even at 18,000 feet, the echo returns. Inside a concrete bunker, RAF radar operator Corporal Joan Edwards, age 23, leans over the cathode ray screen. A faint blip appears at 90 miles out. Then another. Then dozens. She pushes her headset back, voice calm but urgent. Ray detected. Bearing 110. Strength heavy. Estimated altitude 12,000. Plot please. She gives no speech. No panic. Just data. Within seconds the information reaches Fighter Command Headquarters at Bentley Priory. On a massive map table, WAF plotters move colored markers, each representing a German formation, across the channel in real time. Above the table, Air Chief Marshal Hugh Dowding watches with hands behind his back, jaw tight. His entire strategy depends on conserving planes and pilots. Every takeoff wastes fuel and stamina. Every unnecessary fight bleeds the RAF dry. But radar has just given him the one thing commanders have always begged for in war: time. Dowding points at the closest squadrons. Order 11 Group to intercept. Tell Park only commit what he needs. Seconds later, telephones ring. Bells clang in squadron huts. Pilots run. At RAF Biggin Hill, an officer shouts into the dormitory. Spitfires scramble. Scramble. Raid incoming. Young men, some barely 19, leap from their bunks, boots half-laced, hands shaking as they pull on Mae West vests. Outside, mechanics already have engines warmed and trembling with power. Propellers bite into the air. The ground shakes. 12 Spitfires lift into the sky. Not by luck. Not by guesswork. Because radar saw the enemy while they were still forming up over France. To the Luftwaffe, something feels wrong. By mid-July, German pilots begin asking the same question. How are the British always there? Every formation, whether bombers or fighters, keeps finding RAF squadrons arriving exactly on time. Not too early, not too late. The Germans know the British do not have enough airborne patrols to cover the whole coast. They know fuel reserves are small. They know the RAF is outnumbered. Yet the British never seem surprised. August 13, 1940. Adlertag Eagle Day. Hitler unleashes his full assault on the RAF. 1,485 German aircraft take off. Britain prepares to be crushed. Chain home detects them all. Radar logs 5 separate raids, each one tracked, measured, sorted by altitude and direction, then fed into the command system. Without radar, Britain would have been forced to keep fighters in constant air patrol, exhaust their fuel, and lose pilots before the main battle even began. Instead, the RAF sends only what it needs where it needs it, like a boxer blocking blows instead of wildly swinging. The Luftwaffe expects British fighters to panic and burn themselves out. Instead, they appear from the clouds in perfect timing, hit the bombers, then vanish. German ace Adolf Galland later recalled, "It was as if they had foreknowledge of our every move." They did. It came from 350-foot towers no German spy ever understood. But radar alone isn't enough. Raw data is useless without people who can read it, filter it, and command it. The unsung battlefield of 1940 is not only the sky. It is the dark rooms, the map tables, the headphones, the calm voices cross-referencing speed, vector, and squadron readiness. Women of the WAF. Mathematicians. Clerks in uniform. None fire a bullet. All help win the battle. Through them, every British pilot flies with something no German has. Information. Late August. The Luftwaffe shift strategy. If the British always rise to fight, then the British must know the raids are coming. So Berlin orders a new priority. Destroy the radar towers. August 12th. Stukas dive bomb the chain home station at Ventnor. Explosions tear the steel. Dust fills the bunkers. Antennas bend and cables snap. But the Germans don't know the truth. Radar towers are nearly indestructible. The real machinery, the receivers, transmitters, amplifiers, is underground. By nightfall, Ventnor is back online. Another raid hits Dover. Another hits Rye. The Luftwaffe wastes bombs and precious aircraft on what it mistakes for a fragile new technology. But radar refuses to die. Even when towers are hit, the network continues. Even if one site fails, two others overlap its coverage. The German High Command eventually gives up attacking the system altogether. They still don't understand what they're facing. And by the time they do, it will be too late. Radar has turned the sky into a chessboard. But one last, terrifying phase of the Battle of Britain is coming. When the Luftwaffe stops bombing airfields and turns toward London. And the fate of an entire nation will hinge on whether invisible radio waves can keep working under the heaviest air assault in human history. September 7, 1940, 16:43 hours. Thames Estuary. A roar like distant thunder rolls over the English coastline, then grows and grows until the sound becomes a living thing. Civilians look up from markets, bicycles, and factory yards. What they see freezes them in place. Wave after wave of Heinkel and Dornier bombers, escorted by thick black swarms of Messerschmitt 109s, stretching from one horizon to the other. Over 300 aircraft in one formation, all of them heading straight for London. Inside the radar control room at RAF Fornes, the scope is almost glowing with echoes. Corporal Joan Edwards grips her pencil so hard it digs into her glove. She has never seen a return this large. Plot. Raid strength maximum. Direction 170. Estimated altitude 14,000. Target London. Confirm London. The words travel up the chain at blinding speed. At Bentley Priory, the map table becomes a battlefield of colored arrows. Red markers equals German bombers. Blue markers equals RAF squadrons. Black triangles equals raids confirmed by radar. Doubting stares at the table, unmoving. This is the moment the Luftwaffe has been waiting for, the all-out strike designed to break Britain's will. But the RAF knows it's coming, because the towers saw them while they were still assembling over Calais. 1705, RAF Hornchurch. A pilot named Allendear, 54 Squadron, straps into his Spitfire. He has already fought 3 times today. His arms ache. His ears are still ringing from cannon fire. But the scramble bell isn't asking him how tired he is. He slams the canopy shut. The controller's voice snaps through the radio. Bandits, Vector 180. Angels 14. Large formation. Good luck, Hornchurch. The propeller spins. Deer's Spitfire claws into the sky. Beside him, a Polish pilot from 303 Squadron makes the sign of the cross. These men barely share a language, only a common enemy. 1718, over London. Bomb doors open. London burns. Warehouses along the docks explode in a chain of fireballs. Millions of windows shatter inward. Civilians stagger through smoke thick as wool. Yet even as bombs fall, the RAF arrives. Not too late, not scattered, not guessing. They come in layers, in wings, in timing that should have been impossible for a force so outnumbered. But radar has turned chaos into order. The Luftwaffe expected the RAF to be broken by now. Instead, German pilots look back in disbelief as Spitfires and Hurricanes burst from the sun, diving in pairs and fours, striking the bomber streams exactly where they are weakest. A German gunner shouts into his intercom, "We wissen sie, wo wir sind." How do they know where we are? It is a question no one in Berlin can yet answer. Night falls. London glows red against the clouds. Fire crews fight flames with hoses too small for the inferno. Children sleep in tube stations. The smell of burning timber and hot brick hangs over the Thames like a shroud. But across Britain, another miracle is taking place. Even in the dark, when the human eye is useless, radar keeps working. Chain Holmes still sees the bombers lifting off from France. Filter rooms still count. Plotters still move markers. Controllers still vector fighters into the night. For the first time in history, a nation can fight a war in darkness. Germany expected panic. Instead, they find a country that bends, but does not break. Hitler becomes impatient. If the RAF cannot be beaten in the sky, then London must be bombed into surrender. So the nightly raids continue for 57 consecutive nights. But something else is happening. Silently, invisibly, relentlessly. The RAF is not running out of planes. The Luftwaffe is. Radar has done its job so completely that Dowding can preserve his squadrons, rotate his pilots, and only fight battles of necessity, not desperation. Germany, on the other hand, must fly long missions through defended airspace, with fuel tanks draining and engines overheating, just to reach the target. And every time they turn for home, they leave another Heinkel burning in the English countryside. By October, the Luftwaffe begins losing something even more critical than bombers: morale. German intelligence still has no idea how the RAF always knows where to be. Some German officers blame spies. Others claim British pilots can see through the clouds. One report even suggests the RAF has invented a new drug that makes pilots stay awake for days. The truth is simpler. A row of quiet-looking towers on the coast has changed the entire mathematics of war. But the final turning point is coming. A day when the Luftwaffe makes one last, desperate gamble. And radar will decide the outcome before a single shot is fired. October 12, 1940. German High Command, Berlin. The room is thick with cigarette smoke and frustration. Maps of England are scattered across the conference table. Every line, every arrow, every bombing pattern has failed to force the RAF into collapse. Reichsmarshal Hermann Göring, furious and humiliated, slams his fist against the map. The British must be down to their last squadrons. They must be. But not one general in the room can explain why the RAF still appears in strength, why they never chase decoys, why they never burn fuel in pointless patrols, why they always defend the right target at the right moment. And not a single German officer has the right answer. Because the RAF doesn't guess. It knows. October 15, 1940. 18:25 hours. Pas-de-Calais, France. The Luftwaffe prepares for what will be one of its largest night raids yet, an all-or-nothing attack on London and industrial centers. More than 500 bombers are being loaded, fueled, and armed. Pilots receive their briefing. Fly low over the channel. Climb at the last moment. Hit London while the RAF is exhausted. They believe radar can't track them below 3,000 feet. They believe the British are blind at night. They are wrong on both counts. Because British radar has evolved, too. In a control room at RAF Stanmore, a new device is being tested. GCI, Ground Controlled Interception Radar. Instead of just detecting bombers, it can now guide fighters in the dark, vectoring them by radio to the exact altitude and bearing of enemy aircraft. Fighter Command's defensive edge is no longer just early warning. It is real-time direction of combat. Squadrons now fly like a single organism. One brain, many wings. The Luftwaffe is flying into a trap it cannot see. 21:02, over the channel. German bombers spread out as planned, wings black against moonlit sea. But 22 miles inland, the oscilloscopes are already alive with contacts. Operators don't panic. They don't even raise their voices. They track and report, like surgeons reading vital signs. One line of data becomes a position. 2 lines become a heading. 3 lines become an interception. By 2114, RAF night fighters are already climbing to meet the first wave, without ever having seen it. War has just entered the age of electronic combat. 2231, near Maidstone. A German Heinkel crew hears nothing but the drone of their own engines, until streaks of tracer fire explode around them. The rear gunner swings his MG-15 wildly. He never saw the RAF fighter coming. Nobody does. A Spitfire, guided by ground radar, has slipped into firing range in total darkness. The Heinkel goes down in flames. For the first time since the Blitz began, the Luftwaffe realizes something horrifying. Even at night, the British are still waiting for them. By dawn, 32 German bombers are missing. Not lost in fog. Not crashed from fuel starvation. Shot down. The shock reaches Berlin like a cold wind. Göring refuses to believe it. Impossible. The English cannot see in the dark. But they can. They do. Because radar never sleeps. The British have managed what no military in history has accomplished before. A nationwide, fully coordinated early warning and interception system. A network long before the word existed. November 1940. The Luftwaffe begins to withdraw bomber units from France. January 1941. German High Command quietly shifts focus to the Balkans and Russia. By spring, the largest and deadliest air force in Europe has stopped trying to defeat Britain in the sky. Not because they ran out of bombs. Not because they ran out of pilots. But because radar made the cost of every mission too high to continue. What British radar did in 1940 was not just detect aircraft. It changed strategy, changed aviation, changed warfare itself. Instead of reacting, Britain could anticipate. Instead of spreading forces thin, it could focus them. For every Spitfire built in a British factory, radar created 2 more in strategic value, because every one of them was used exactly where it mattered. The Luftwaffe never recovered from the losses of 1940, and historians agree. Without radar, the RAF would have been overwhelmed in weeks. With radar, Britain survived. And because Britain survived, the Allies would one day land at Normandy. The world that rose from the ashes of 1945 was built on the echoes of invisible waves. First bounced off German bombers in 1940. May 8, 1945. V-Day, London. The streets are flooded with cheering crowds. Flags wave from shattered windows. Women climb onto lampposts. Men dance in RAF uniforms still smelling of engine oil. Britain has survived the unthinkable. But in the celebration, there is no parade for the radar operators. No medals for the women in dark bunkers who read echoes on a screen. No statues for the scientists who built metal towers no one understood. No broadcast credits for the engineers who turned equations into early warnings. The victory belonged to the Spitfire, the Hurricane, and the few. Yet those few had help from something almost no one could see, and even fewer could understand. Because the most important battle of 1940 was not just fought in the clouds. It was fought in silence, using electricity, mathematics, and belief. Radar had been born in secrecy. It would remain secret long after the war. Even Winston Churchill, who fully understood its importance, refused to let the public know just how close Britain came to collapse without it. He later wrote, "It was the only foundation on which our air defense was built." But the most remarkable truth? Britain's radar system was not just a technological success. It was a strategic revolution. For the first time in military history, a nation could see an enemy long before the enemy arrived. Commanders could direct an entire air force like a conductor directing a symphony. Time itself became a weapon. The invention the RAF once dismissed as science fiction became the reason there was still a Britain left to defend. After the war, the world changed, but radar did not disappear. It expanded. It went aboard ships, into submarines, onto fighter jets, into civilian life, airports, weather stations, satellites, spacecraft. Every time a commercial jet crosses the Atlantic safely, every time a hurricane is tracked before it hits land, every time air traffic controllers keep two planes from colliding in fog, a piece of 1940 lives on. The war taught nations something they would never forget. Seeing first means surviving first. But what of the people behind it? Sir Robert Watson Watt was knighted. His papers would later become the foundation of modern radar theory. The WAF plotters, often teenagers when the battle began, went home quietly. Many never recognized for the lives they saved. The towers of Chain Home, rusting now, still stand along the coast, monuments not of stone, but of steel and silence. Some call them relics. Others call them ghosts of a war fought with electricity instead of bullets. But to every historian who has studied the Battle of Britain, the verdict is simple. Without radar, the RAF would not have lasted a month. With radar, they lasted the war. And the world's first great air battle, the one that decided whether freedom or fascism would command the skies, was won not by numbers, but by knowledge.